History is often written by the victors, by generals and politicians who shaped the world with maps and treaties. But there is another kind of history. A history whispered in the dark corners of rural communities, passed down through generations, not in books, but in warnings. This is the history of things that do not obey the laws of man or nature. And of all the American ghost stories, of all the legends that haunt the deep woods of the United States, one stands apart. It stands apart because it was not a fleeting shadow or a momentary hallucination. It was a siege, a war, a 4-year campaign of terror waged by an invisible entity against a single, respected family. This is the story of the Bell Witch, and it remains the only documented case in American history where a spirit was legally credited with the murder of a human being. To understand the horror, you must first understand the setting. We are going back to the year 1817, the American frontier, the Red River community in Tennessee. This was not a place for the weak. It was a land of dense, ancient forests, carved out by hard men and women who feared God and worked the earth. John Bell was the patriarch of such a family. He was a prosperous farmer, a deacon in the Baptist church, a father who provided for his wife, Lucy, and their children. They were the picture of the American dream of that era, respected, safe, or so they thought. The terror did not begin with a scream. It began with something much more unsettling, an anomaly in nature. One afternoon, John Bell was walking through his cornfields, inspecting the crop. The sun was high, the air was still. In the middle of a row of corn, he saw an animal sitting on the ground. At first glance, it looked like a dog, but as John drew closer, the shape seemed wrong. It was black, with the body of a canine, but the head was distinctively that of a rabbit. It stared at him with eyes that were too intelligent, too human. John, a man of action, raised his gun and fired. The creature didn't yelp. It didn't bleed. It simply vanished into thin air, as if erased from existence. John didn't know it then, but that bullet had rung the dinner bell for something ancient. That evening, the family began to hear the sounds. At first, they were external. It sounded like someone was throwing heavy stones against the wooden siding of the farmhouse. Thud, thud, thud. John would send his sons outside with lanterns and muskets, circling the house looking for pranksters or neighbors. They found nothing. The dust was undisturbed. The night was silent. But the moment they went back inside and extinguished the lamps, the bombardment would resume. Weeks turned into months, and the entity moved closer. It moved inside the walls. Every night, exactly at bedtime, the sounds would start. It sounded like a giant rat gnawing at the bedposts, a wet, grinding sound of teeth against wood. Then the sound of chains being dragged across the floorboards, the sounds of heavy breathing coming from empty corners. The Bell family stopped sleeping. They existed in a state of perpetual siege, eyes wide open in the dark, waiting for the noise to start. But noise, no matter how frightening, can be endured. Violence cannot. The entity soon grew bored of simply scaring them. It wanted to touch them. It started with the children. In the middle of the night, the bed covers would be ripped off their sleeping bodies by an invisible force. When they tried to pull them back, they felt a resistance, a physical struggle against strong, unseen hands. Then came the hair pulling. The youngest daughter, Betsy Bell, became the primary target. She would wake up screaming as her hair was yanked violently, her head slammed against the headboard. When her parents lit the candles, they would see red handprints blooming on her pale skin, fingerprints of a hand that wasn't there. John Bell, a man of pride, kept this a secret for as long as he could. He feared that the community would think his family was insane, or worse, cursed by God. But the activity became too violent to hide. He confided in a neighbor, James Johnston. Johnston, a skeptic, agreed to spend the night at the Bell farm. He wanted to prove it was a natural phenomenon. He brought his Bible and his gun. By morning, James Johnston was a changed man. He had seen the bedclothes ripped from the beds. He had felt the physical blows. He told John Bell, "In the name of the Lord, you must tell the community. This is a spirit, just like in the Bible." Once the secret was out, the Bell farm became a spectacle. People traveled from miles around to witness the spirit, and the spirit, feeding off the energy and the attention, grew stronger. It began to speak. It didn't speak like a ghost moaning in a hallway. It spoke with clarity, intelligence, and malice. It had a voice. Sometimes it was low and guttural. Sometimes it was high and mocking. It identified itself as Kate. When asked what it was, it gave conflicting answers. "I am a witch," it would say. "I am the spirit of an Indian buried here. I am everywhere." It could quote scripture word for word, correcting the local preachers during their sermons. It knew the secrets of everyone in the room. It would gossip about neighbors miles away, revealing sins that no one else could know. The entity developed a complex personality. To Lucy Bell, the mother, Kate was strangely kind. It would sing hymns to her and bring her fresh fruit from nowhere when she was sick. But for John Bell, for the father, it had only pure, distilled hatred. "I will kill you, old Jack," the voice would whisper from the darkness. "I will torment you until your last breath." The fame of the haunting spread so far that it reached the ears of General Andrew Jackson, the future President of the United States. Jackson was a war hero, a man known for his toughness, a man who had fought duels and commanded armies. He didn't believe in ghosts. He decided to visit the Bell farm with a wagon train of men, determined to expose the fraud. This brings us to one of the most famous incidents in American folklore. As Andrew Jackson's wagon approached the property line of the Bell farm, it suddenly stopped. The wheels were not stuck in mud. The horses were pulling with all their might, their muscles straining, foam dripping from their mouths, but the wagon wouldn't move an inch. It was as if it had hit an invisible wall of iron. The soldiers checked the wheels. They whipped the horses. Nothing. Then a metallic, disembodied voice laughed from the bushes. "All right, General, let the wagon go. I'll see you tonight." Instantly, the invisible weight lifted, and the horses bolted forward. Andrew Jackson, the man who feared no army, turned to his men and said, "By the Eternal, boys, that must be the Bell Witch." That night, Jackson and his men stayed in the farmhouse. One of his men, a self-proclaimed witch tamer, pulled out a pistol with silver bullets and bragged that he would kill the spirit. The entity didn't appreciate the arrogance. The man suddenly screamed, his body contorting. He claimed he was being stuck with pins and beaten by invisible fists. He was physically dragged towards the door by his feet. The next morning, Andrew Jackson and his regiment were seen leaving the farm in a hurry. The future president was quoted as saying, "I would rather fight the entire British army again than face the Bell Witch." But while the visitors came and went, John Bell was trapped. The entity's promise to destroy him was methodical. It wasn't just physical attacks, it was a biological dismantling of the man. John began to suffer from strange episodes. His tongue would swell in his mouth until he couldn't speak and could barely breathe. His face would twitch uncontrollably. He became unable to eat. The once strong patriarch wasted away to a skeleton, while the voice mocked him daily, cursing him, slapping his face while he lay helpless in bed. The torture continued for 3 years. 3 years of sleepless nights, of physical abuse, of psychological warfare. And then came December 20th, 1820. John Bell slipped into a coma. He lay in his bed, breathing shallowly. His family surrounded him, praying. His son went to the medicine cabinet to get his father's usual medicine, but instead of the normal bottle, he found a strange, small vial of dark,
murky liquid that no one had ever seen before. "What is this?" the son asked. From the empty air above the bed, the voice of Kate spoke, loud and triumphant. "I put that there. It's a dose for old Jack. I gave him a big dose last night while he was sleeping, and that fixed him." To test the liquid, they gave a single drop to the family cat. The animal convulsed and died instantly. It was potent poison. John Bell never woke up. He died that morning. But the entity wasn't done. At John Bell's funeral, attended by hundreds of people from the county, the atmosphere was somber and quiet. As the coffin was lowered into the frozen Tennessee earth, the silence was broken, not by weeping, but by singing. The voice of the witch began to sing a rowdy drinking song,